I am Captain Spawn, and this is day 316 of Spawn Year. "50 more long, grueling, likely painful days of Spawn reviews. 50 days before I finally see if my patience is paid off. If, by putting up with Tiny Adam West's conditioning and going along with his training, I will finally have the opportunity to dot that final I, cross that final T, and never be forced to read one of these infernal things again. Unfortunately, I have to wait and cross that T when I come to it. It's difficult to imagine 50 more reviews because, from my perspective, this continuity crumbled under its own monstrous weight eons ago, and now it's just grabbing whatever random ideas it can come up with to graft onto itself, like hodgepodge dorm room furniture. When Hein wants to do something that goes against what little pre-established, relatively consistent rules there are, he just makes up some new ones and pretends that's how it's always been, hoping nobody will notice. And considering the creator of the book has a long history of doing precisely the same thing, Hein could about justify it by calling it tradition. Captain Cod wants me to believe that continuing to review these comics will turn me into something like Freakadoo, and while I've chosen to ignore him and play this out, let me make one thing crystal clear. That is still a distinct possibility. I am sick to death of having to keep track of all these characters and events so I can complain about them when they come back and they don't add up. But I'm supposed to be writing critiques about a comic that takes longer than an old guy and a Boy Scout strapped together, dragging a house floating with balloons attached to the top to get anywhere. It makes me mad, and I'm just hoping to get through the rest before I go mad, if that hasn't happened already. The most frustrating thing is that if you only picked up this two-part story arc, assuming you like supernatural horror in a Western setting and you don't mind really gruesome imagery, you'd probably quite enjoy it. It's more of a flashback explanation of the genesis of the Simmons family name than a real story, but there are definitely a lot of things to like. And if you don't know what's being retconned or just how incredibly and absurdly convoluted the road to Al's spawnification continues to be, you'd likely chalk it up to your own ignorance. Oh, how I long for that ignorance I had on day one, when I wrote that Todd McFarlane seemed to be headed in a sure direction. This one is yet another issue focused on revenge, carnage, and a man manipulated by hell into becoming something worse than that which victimized him and sent him there. The man who had all manner of nightmares dropped on him last issue was nicknamed Old Job by the town Bane. Yeah, Bane! Man, you'd think after this happened in the late 1800s that everybody in those other really ominous and prophetic sounding towns would evacuate before hell rained down on them. But if people aren't idiots, it's harder to contrive ways to see them flayed, to use Gunslinger Spawn's word choice, and that's what this book is really about. The nickname is appropriate and becomes perverse, as it's the devil this Job trusts to restore his health and power, and he's rewarded for his anger and vengeance rather than his faith and piety. And I like that Hein mirrors that biblical story and pays it off without being heavy-handed about it in a fairly clever way, and it's easy to appreciate because Job isn't his real name. There are several panels of breathtaking but ultra-violent action as Job uses his new power to take his grievance against Kemper, the man who killed his family, out on the entire city of Bane. He kills every man, woman, and child there, and he doesn't even give them a cruel, fleeting moment of hope first. No underground prison with a rope you can try to climb out of it with. No one of you holds the trigger. Nothing. Simmons, who chose not to take Mamon's deal, is horrified to see what Job's unchecked wrath has turned him into. And I like that he emphasizes even the children. He's looking at a corrupted man not so different from the Spawn his grandson will one day spawn. There are several neat cinematic moments that separate this from the generic and run-of-the-mill writing I'm used to in this series. Hein is enjoying himself, and it shows in the energy and care he's put in the dialogue. Before he brutally kills Kemper, Job says he's nothing, guessing he's the illegitimate son of some pathetic prostitute. He used much, much coarser language than that. And then he delivers my favorite line. "I'll give you a finer exit from this life than the manner of your conception." which he follows by blowing Kemper up with a stick of dynamite. Hein really took the opportunity to use the setting and period to his advantage, and I'm surprised that Job has his own unique way of speaking. There's also some solid, if not altogether subtle imagery. After Maman commands Job to spare Simmons, Job drags him out of the city in a casket. Simmons' real name is Francis Parker. He takes the name Henry Thomas Simmons from the man who was supposed to be buried in the casket. So like Job, he too is reborn, but figuratively. He made the right choice in refusing Maman's deal, and he gets to live a life now, while Job has become a far worse force than the one he returned to enact revenge on. But the casket is also foreshadowing Al's spawn. Henry isn't the only Simmons who will arise from a casket, and this is where things break down again. Henry wrote about all of this in his journal and ended it with a warning not to make a deal with the man in white. Of course, that's not how Al was offered his spawnhood, but that's only because Maman hadn't been invented yet. Even still, Henry wasn't cryptic at all about what Job was or where he came from, and Al's dad believed him apparently. So why didn't he show Al and his brothers that journal so that when Al went to hell, he'd be like, nope, that Job guy killed babies and that hits a little close to home for me. Not gonna do that. Then again, Maman was already screwing with his memories while he was alive, so who knows? But the more important question is, if Maman was dumb enough to tell this good moral man, go have children because for some reason I now know you were meant to begin a line that will spawn the next spawn, and he's going to do to the world what Job did to Bane, why would you go home to your wife and start having kids? And no, they hadn't had any yet. I really liked this guy right up until the end. Also, is Maman talking about the apocalypse or something to come? Is there actually a prophecy that only Maman knows about that goes beyond the apocalypse? Why couldn't that alleged reboot just start as here in the 1800s and let us follow a Western spawn in a 10-gallon hat with dual firearms for 50 issues? Why couldn't there have been a prophecy about me suffering in Spawn Year so these people would feel responsible for giving me better material? Signed, Captain Spawn.